Hi, I'm Simon Kilmurry, and welcome to a conversation for the film Rovina's Choice. I'm the executive producer of the film, along with Atul Gawande, and I'm happy to be talking with one of the directors, Annie Wong, along with our editor, amazing editor, Flavia De Souza. Sorry, Flavia. Great to see you both. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Simon.
Um, so let me jump right in. I'm curious, is this the first time you all have worked together on a project, or have you worked previously on other things?
It was my first time working with Annie and Tom and you and
Okay.
Atul. But Annie and Tom and Atul had worked together multiple times, I believe.
And Annie, I'm curious, Flavia's got an amazing track record um uh as an editor. What is it in her work that made you want to work with her on this film?
Well, we were looking for someone who had a great facility for looking at verite and, looking for an editor. The editors come in all, you know, shapes and sizes and skill sets. And a good friend of mine had recommended Flavia. And we took a look at some of her previous work and we just said she's perfect for this story. She gets it. She, obviously cuts with great deal of sensitivity and story and wonderful just nuance. She picks and pulls things out. And so we thought she'd be really, really great.
And Flavia, when you first, I'm curious, what was your thinking when you first saw the initial material for Rovina's Choice in terms of the possibility of making a short film out of this?
Sure. Um, when Annie and Tom reached out to me, I think um, there was one particular project that I worked on called Open Heart, a short film that about a group of Rwandan kids that go to get heart surgery in the Sudan, and it's character focused and it takes place in Africa. And I think that particular film caught their eye. And similarly with Rovina's Choice, I wanted to focus on a, a character, a main participant. And I thought Rovina uh, had the star power, so to speak, to be the central character. I think to give face to the issue was very important to me.
And tell me a little bit about your process as an editor, but also how you collaborate with your directors that you're working with. Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Um, Especially if I'm working for the first time with someone, which was the case with Annie and Tom, it's very important to check that we are on the same page in the beginning, early on. And for that to happen, the directors, producers, have to see in my work with their footage, uh, their vision, a part of their vision materialized. And um, I usually want to identify, when I come to a project, a section, a scene, the opening, some part of the story that I can quickly put together so that we can check that we are on the same page. So that's what I did. And I think in this film, there was a preoccupation of marrying these two, not two different stories. It was the same story, but from two very different points of view. The bird's eye view of the health providers and the policy makers, like a tool, and the on the ground view, experience, lived experience. And so that definitely was a challenge. And I wanted to get to a way to solve that early on, as soon as possible. And I can't do it alone. So I love talking through with the other creative partners how we're gonna achieve that.
that was something that struck me in the film, and in the process of watching the film as it evolved, was that kind of delicate balance between the macro of the issue and the micro of the story. I'm curious, Annie, working with Flavia, how was it for you and Tom in kind of solving that bit of a puzzle of how to fit these things together?
It was a lot of talking back and forth about, you know, about that balance, how much of it do we give to the context of the camp, of the, the political situation, of Atul's own personal, journey um, going to the camp. So, and then how much of it is Rovina. So it was a lot of back and forth because I think that probably was the hardest is to weave these two different um, strands together, which, Flavia did so beautifully. But that was probably the biggest struggle I think we'd have, putting it in, and especially in such a short amount of time.
Oh yeah, short amount of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, how much time? Tell us.
Well, I
Uh,
mean, it was, I talked physically, I mean, a short, the actual length of the film. And then also just, we had what, maybe 8 weeks to put it together?
was it 8 weeks? There was a break there, right? Maybe it was 5 weeks, and then I had to go somewhere,
Oh, that's right.
and then another 3 weeks. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
Um, Flavia, I want to ask you kind of an ethical question, or it's also kind of a storytelling approach question, and that is, I think, Rovina is a very strong presence, it's a very dignified presence, in the film. But it's very delicate material. It's a very vulnerable time for her. As an editor, how do you approach um taking someone's story in that kind of vulnerable position and approaching it with the kind of the humanity and dignity and agency that it deserves and comes through in the film?
Hmm. Um, I can talk about the choices that were um, conscious choices, but I do think that there are some subconscious choices too being made on my part. Um, Having grown up in the global south, um, not in a as vulnerable position as Rovina, and I don't want to imply nowhere close to it, but I've seen, um, especially women in those types of positions in which choices are not available to them. Choice is a privilege. Um, that there's something that I kind of understand about that way of um, viewing the world subconsciously, I think. But yeah, well, it was a preoccupation that I didn't want her to be presented just as a victim. Like even though she is in a very vulnerable position and not does not own her destiny fully, there she is extremely strong and has some agency, and it is in a and is in a very tough spot, but that it's not just things happening to her, that um, she has agency as well.
And Annie, how do you approach that issue in working with an editor and making sure that we're not re-victimizing people through telling their stories, but using using their stories to shine a light on these larger issues, but in a way that is respectful of them and Yeah, it's a really challenging issue, I think, for a lot of films, which you all managed to deal with, I think, very delicately.
I think we really wanted we didn't want Rovina to be viewed as a victim, but she also, surprisingly to us, spoke with, you know, great articulation, about her struggles. And I think we just let her speak, about the situation. And I think that was probably the best thing that we could do, is just give her her own words as much as possible.
Hmm.
which I think it was a preoccupation on the production side, that Rovina, to get her buy-ins, to talk. She wanted to tell her story. I think that was cathartic to her and helpful on some level, to let the world know, as opposed to feeling alone and the only one, that had the situation happen to her.
Um, there's something which really struck me as I was watching you all work together and watching iterations of the film as it developed, and that was a tool is such a strong presence. And what he has to say is so kind of grounding in kind of the policy, the folly of the decisions that have been made that are now affecting millions of people. And Rovina's our person in that story. Um, but I think in many films it might be a temptation to foreground a tool. He's a well-known personality. He's a extremely accomplished writer, doctor, public health policy specialist. Um, um, but he's there very much so. Um, but you chose to give the majority of the space to Rovina. It feels like that was kind of going back to that macro micro question again. That was, kind of the opposite of what a news story might have been, but still based in solid journalism. Talk a little bit about the tension in making that decision to kind of pull back a little bit on a tool's presence and foreground Ravina's story. And either of you, but Flavia, maybe you go first.
So that's part of the, centering the human story that I was coming to the film. That's what I was most interested in, that we letting Rovina speak for herself as much as possible. So I made this decision early on that she was going to invite us into the world, and that each topic, she was gonna each new theme topic in the story, she was gonna be the one initiating it, bringing us into that, and then Atul and the doctors could join in.
Yeah, I would say that a tool, we probably could have, made this all about him, but it wasn't all about him, and he would not have wanted this story to be about him. It is about his finding what the impact is of the dismantling of USAID, and that the story was what it was, and we pretty much showed that, um, and brought that more to the foreground. And it's really his, going out to seek what 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 was the most immediate impact of, what he always keeps calling the blast zone of that immediate dissolution of this agency.
And Flavia, I'm curious. Do you approach working on a short film differently than you approach working on a feature? Obviously, with a feature, you have a much bigger canvas and there's more room for digression and exploration of issues. But what are some of the key differences in how you approach the short form versus long form films?
Um, in the case of this particular film, we knew from the start it was gonna be a short, so I had that in mind going. It is a story that can't develop over 75 or 90 minutes. We only have about, maybe 30 um, minutes worth of story. Um, do I approach it differently? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that I approach it. Obviously, you can have more complexity if you can let themes develop over 75 minutes as opposed to, 20.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for the work you did on this film, Flavia, with Annie and Tom. To me, documentary editors are the great alchemists of our business, and whatever you are able to do has some form of magic. And with this, and you certainly applied that to Rovina's Choice. So, thank you so much for talking with me today, and congratulations on the film being on the shortlist.
Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Simon.